what is mainstream? Like, how many people nowadays in our society, in our classes, unless you're in a very specific location, you look around, and if it's not, the color of your skin, or, if you have glasses, or the color of your hair, it could be like neurodivergence, or, everybody has something.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another You May Contribute a Verse. I'm Josh Munkin, alongside my co-host Brenna Jennerette and podcast wizard John Seymour for the latest in our ongoing series of universally wonderful interviews and conversations with Kidlit creators. This time we talk to Danielle Sharkan, author of a couple of picture books that I would like to share with you at this moment. In 2024, Sharing Shalom came out, and this year saw the release of Ellie the Eggspert. I will get fully out of the way of that conversation so that we can talk about those books and everything else, Danielle. But first, a quick word from our sponsor, Tealmore Press. Tealmore is a boutique children's book publisher in Canada who puts together just really wonderful books, the latest couple of which are When the Sea Left, which came out about a month ago. When the Sea Left, very scary, trash-filled cover on that one. Go check it out for yourself. And the other one is less scary, unless you don't like mushrooms. Fungi are more than mushrooms. Those are the latest two releases from Tealmore. See everything that Tealmore is up to at Tealmore, Tielmour press.com. And now to our conversation with Danielle.
Danielle and I were just talking about the fact that we're both in, there she was again, we're both in Colorado, which we did not know until you messaged and said, Josh. Yeah, we're like 20 minutes apart.
And it's funny that I was the one that uncovered that, because I was doing my due diligence like I like to do, peeping people's LinkedIn profiles to see what we can talk about and looking for websites and all that sort of thing. So, all of a sudden I saw Longmont on there, and that's exactly where you are.
Yeah. So let's jump into, so you said you've been able to write more the last couple of years. So why don't we talk more about your writing journey? And you had been teaching up until recently. You said you were taking a break. So how did you get into the Kidlit space and writing?
So during COVID, I had some extra time, and I had a baby, and I was looking for sort of an outlet. And I have a friend who published, and I read about PJ Library. It was like a Jewish organization that publishes Jewish books, and I was like, oh, maybe I'll start writing something. And so I wrote some books, and I didn't know what to do at that point. But then when I talked to my friend about it, she's like, she had just been published or got an agent, and she gave me some advice of going to 12 by 12 and Twitter, now X, Kidlit 411, and some groups, and get a critique partner, and Justin Cologne's BB Chat. And so I did all that, and that just started the journey. And it took about 2 years. I was just learning and doing contests and meeting other writers, joining critique groups, and eventually got an agent.
All of that is a lot. Did you know? Yeah. I mean, did you know what you were getting into? How real a look into the industry did you know?
Yeah, not really. Actually, I took a course at University of California, San Diego with Marcy Colleen, and so I took that.
Wait, Party Bears?
Yeah, super Happy Party Bears?
That's right.
Yeah, I met her at ALA, and she's exactly what you would think she would be in person. As she, anyways,
with the Party Bear book, right?
Yeah, I was like, hey, I know you. Yeah,
and so I took the course, and part of it is like writing a book, and I wrote my first book according to the picture book rules, and I was like, oh, this is gonna sell. This is amazing. This is like my masterpiece.
Totally.
And so I didn't really know what I was getting into, because I thought it would be a lot easier than it was. But I felt like that was the challenge I wanted to. I was motivated and determined to get published, and so I did what I needed to do, and eventually it got published not long after.
The book that you wrote through Marcy Colleen's course is the one that got published?
No, not that one.
Okay.
I remember
I was like, wow,
everybody.
that's amazing.
No, no, no. Everybody was saying, just wait till, wait to query for agents and wait, till you're ready. And everybody's saying like their mistake is not waiting and thinking like their first book is going to publish. And that's sort of what happened with me as well. So many, many other books later, was my first Sharing Shalom. That was probably almost 2 years after the course.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Many
I think,
books later.
right. I think in this case, in the case of Kidlit, ignorance definitely is bliss. Because I think if you knew what you knew on the, once you're like in it on the other end and all of, just like all of the stuff you have to wade through, I think it would scare a lot of people off. Like,
Yeah.
I think it maybe is helpful to have some of that like hope and naivety coming into it. So you're like, you have some of that hope that you're like, oh, this can totally sell. Like my stuff is great, instead of
definitely
a little bit more jaded.
It is a rite of
sure.
passage, though. I refuse to think about that process as a mistake, because it's something that we all do. I mean, if every one of us knew or had been told and internalized, hey, get ready for almost everybody that goes through this process, you're going to be in for not a wild ride, but a pretty boring waiting filled ride for the next 3 years before you actually see something. It chills.
For sure.
Yeah, totally. So can you tell us how you got your agent then, and shout your agent out and tell us, what, if it was Sharing Shalom that got your agent, or how it went?
Sure. So in the summer of 2021, I got in a mentorship with PB Chat, Justin Cologne, and I had been querying and submitting my stories previously, and I got an offer for publishing, but it was a very small and sort of new publisher for a different story. And I really wanted to take it, and I was like asking around, and they're saying, check out the other stories or their illustrator, like see, try and see if that will be a good idea, because it's small and it's not well known. And a lot of people say that it's like, your first book is really important, and the publisher and all that. So I sort of put a pause on it, and I said, can we wait till after the mentorship? And in the meantime, I was writing and getting mentored by Elisa Boxer.
She's amazing. Shout out to Elisa Boxer. She's been on the show. We love her. She's incredible. Yeah,
she
wow.
Really is. Yeah, so that was a great experience. It really boosted my confidence, and that's actually when I wrote Sharing Shalom, which had a different title. And so in the meantime, I wasn't querying as much during that summer, but there was a pitch party, Savvy Authors, and I pitched a different story, which is going to be my second book coming out, Ellie the Eggspert, which was a fun and lighthearted story, and I got an offer. Yeah, so that was pretty exciting. But the agent, she's also new to Kidlit, and she also did book by book, and so asking around again, it's great having an agent. I wanted to just jump on it and say, oh yes, I want to get my book out already. And then people were, book by book, it's a little bit more risky. It's better to have a lifelong agent. And so in the meantime, I went back to nudge the other people that I had queried already. And I got 2 offers that way. And one was from Charlotte Wanger, my current agent. And it just seemed like a really good fit. I really loved the stories that she was worked on, and she's really focuses on PBs, picture books. And so then after the internship, I got agented, and we got started and started submitting. And so my first book we submitted did not get sold, but Sharing Shalom was the second one, and it got interest pretty quickly by 2 editors, and one editor couldn't get it through the marketing situation.
Oh, marketing.
And the second editor was able to do that.
You have a degree in marketing too. We're like, don't you know who you're talking to here?
I took a course. I don't have the degree in it, but I took the course around that time because I'm like, oh, this is really interesting. Marketing is affecting the publishing industry and everything else. So yeah, it's really interesting because, you go in as an author and you're like, oh, I want to write children's books, and you learn about the publishing industry and business and marketing and negotiations and contracts and so many more things.
All these things that you never want to have to deal with when you say,
Exactly.
I want to be a writer. I just
I
want
was
to write
just thinking
stuff.
that. I'm like, oh, it's terrible. Like, I don't want to have to deal with any of that. Like, I just want to write books. But yeah, there's this whole other like secret job you have to sort of like understand and take a crash course in and just be like,
Exactly. Right.
What did you originally what did you originally submitted to Charlotte?
So the first story that I wrote was the one that got that offer of publication from the small publisher. And so I actually submitted that first to her co-agent, Rachel, and it was on the back burner for a while, and then I hadn't heard back. So then I submitted to Charlotte, I believe that, and 3 other stories. And actually what happened was she wasn't sure about 1 or 2 of them, so she asked me for 2 more. And I had one that was ready and I submitted it, and then I had one that was in the works. And so it took a few more weeks for me to finish up. And when I submitted the 5th story, she offered me the representation after that.
How did you feel
awesome.
about the I don't know, can I see more stuff? Because that's the same experience I had, and it's worked out for me as well with my agent Joyce Sweeney. But
Oh, nice.
it's interesting to be in the middle of that process and live the uncertainty around, well, they don't want this. They don't want this thing that I really care about. I got to submit some more stuff, right? And like ultimately it works out when you see it through and you care enough about it. But
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting because I actually had like a one-on-one with Joyce, and I had talked with her about the same story that got a lot of traction. And yeah, so I had a lot of like close calls, and it was like people really liked it, but then they weren't sure about it. And so I guess having that first offer, I felt like there was nothing to lose, but I knew that that wasn't my best option because of the book by book situation. And so I was nervous, but I was also like a little bit calm because I knew I had 3 more offers. So in the industry, you just have to sort of keep going. And if you feel confident with your abilities and your stories, then you're getting closer, and you get requests for more, you're winning contests, you get a lot of a lot of clues that you're close. That's what people say, and it's actually what happens.
I've never won a single contest personally. I still believe in my stuff somehow, but never been lucky enough for that.
How did you decide what to send more of? Because, usually they're like, okay, before you query, have 3 to 5 things polished because, they're going to ask for more. So generally it's those first, that first handful. It's not as common to have like a second round of like, hey, actually give me a couple more. And I guess the root of my question is sort of like Sharing Shalom came out, and that is, sort of it's a specific kind of book. And then you were saying the next one that is coming out is more sort of lighthearted and funny, right? Which is different than Sharing Shalom. So I guess my question is, how did you decide what to submit? Like, did you sort of try to stay with us, like a one track voice, or did you try to sort of like, showcase your whole portfolio and be like, look, I can write this and this and this and this and this, or like, what was your strategy?
Yeah, I
Got
did want
eggplants
to.
and Hebrew school.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah, and that also has a story to go along with it. But I wanted to showcase my different stories, and honestly, I didn't have that huge of a variety because when I first started out, that first course with Mercy Colleen, I wanted to do like sort of funny but philosophical and like deep but like puns, and I didn't really have like a super like fixed style or genre. And then I tried rhyme, and I didn't really know that you had to study rhyme in order to write rhyme.
Welcome to the club. You
Yes.
have been indoctrinated.
Right. I did that, and then I understood like the own voices were becoming really, really like hot selling, and I'm like, okay, I'm Jewish. I should write about like Jewish stories and see how that goes. And so then that started on most of the rest of my stories being Jewish, and having the stories coming from personal experiences is something that I think editors and agents like know that is really meaningful. And so my stories from then on had a Jewish twist, and Ellie the Eggspert actually didn't at first. Although I did have an editor review, and she asked me where I got my idea from, and it did have some Jewish inspiration. So she's like, so add that to it. So that also became a Jewish story.
Oh,
Oh,
interesting.
interesting. Yeah. And where did Sharing Shalom come from? What was the sort of like, inspiration for that book?
Yeah. So at the time, I had a critique group, and we were it was a pretty large one, and we shared a lot of stories. And one of my critique partners shared her story about, like, it was during a lot of the Asian hate crimes happening, and so as a Japanese American, she was sharing her story. And then there was the Black Lives Matter like going on, and I realized there's a lot of stuff going on in the Jewish community, but we don't really like to talk about that and to publicize it. It's not something we really want to focus on. And also, when things were happening in the Jewish community, like hate crimes, nobody really it didn't seem like it was a big movement like it was for Black Lives Matters and the Asian hate crimes. And so I was like, it should be like, and I remembered back, there were two things. One was the shootings that happened at the Tree of Life Synagogue in, I think, Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania. And that actually did have a huge, support following and community. Like everybody from that community came together, and that was really inspiring. But from the other small things that were happening, they were constantly happening. Wasn't hearing much. I had two little kids, and I was thinking, like, how am I going to talk to them about this? And actually, there was a close call. It was a fake bomb threat, but for like a year there were bomb threats going around at the Jewish community centers all over the country. They were all fake, luckily, but nobody knows, and you can't just assume it. So they needed to evacuate the school, and my daughter was at a school at that time, and I was also working there, but we left early. So when I came back, or when I heard about it, and like the coworkers and the other students, it's confusing. Like, what are you going to tell a preschooler why we're doing this? And so I thought back into my childhood, and luckily I didn't grow up with much, knowledge or experience of that. But I did think back to the one time that I remembered something like some sort of anti-Semitism happening, which was during, I guess it was when the Gulf War started. And so the synagogue, and grew up in a very Jewish community, so I never really felt like othered or anything. Although, I did my separate holidays, other people did their separate holidays. It just felt like everyone had their own identities and traditions, and it was fine. And so when that incident happened, it was like graffiti, and I heard about it in the news. It's like, I remember watching the news with my parents, and then we couldn't go to Hebrew school for like a week or two or something. And then we went back just as if nothing happened. And so with a combination of like, how am I going to talk to my kids about this? And like, why didn't we talk about that? And the community I grew up has like a very large amount of Holocaust survivors. It had that went there. So it's a community that was really like, dealing with trauma of the past, but not really outspoken. It was more just like trying to move on as Americans, and moving forward and keeping identity, but also just looking forward. And so I guess that was a reason we didn't really talk about it, or maybe because I was probably in third grade. And then when I went back to do some research, I saw in newspaper articles that said, oh yes, the rabbi spoke about it with like the older kids and stuff. So maybe they just talked about it with the older grades. And so I wrote Sharing Shalom as a way that, how can I explain this to my daughter, or how could teachers explain it, what's happening? And it's really hard, because how do you explain why hate crimes happen, or why anti-Semitism in specific happens? And it was twofold, because that was my first intention. And then the second intention was to be an inspiration, like with the Tree of Life Synagogue, like where the community did come together. I wanted to see that. So I'm inspiring other people from different communities to support Jewish people, and also not just Jewish people. It could be an example to support anybody that has experienced a hate crime or discrimination or racism. And yeah, I feel like I also wanted to teach a little bit about Jewish culture. So there's Hebrew lesson in there. There's like an explanation of like what Hebrew school is. Like it's a school after school that you need to go to learn, and just hopefully creating more understanding and empathy about Jewish people, and that anti-Semitism and hatred of Jewish people because they're Jewish is a very real thing. And in the past year, it's been since October 7th, it's just been so prevalent in our society. And, it is inspiring to see some people coming to support, but then it's also a little bit disappointing seeing it spreading. And so hopefully my book can help make a difference. And I feel like it just needs to, be out there more and have more people reading it to more kids, more young kids to understand and really to help stick up for, people being bullied or, there's a lot here. You could stop me at any point because I could keep going.
So there are a couple of aspects about this that I want to explore more and get your thoughts on. But first, I'm going to ask, you were talking about your critique group. Is one of your critique partners Chloe Ward?
Yeah.
I knew it based on your description. And I mean, some of this is reminiscent of the conversation that we had with her about her book,
Hi, Chloe.
which communicates, hey, Chloe, which also, communicates trauma in a really kid-friendly.
Mm-hmm.
Then listening to you describe your experiences with this, I mean, I've acknowledged many times on this podcast as a straight, white, married, non-religious parent, there is not a lot of cultural trauma that I can, should, or would ever try and draw from. But the frame of reference that this puts me in is, for example, when I was a kid, my family's garage burned down. It was an accidental burning, and it's not anything on the scale or scope of an anti-Semitic bit of vandalism for a community to deal with. But I offer it as an example of, I was small, something bad happened, didn't really understand it, kind of glossed over it and moved on. And only in retrospect do I understand, now that I'm an adult, the impact that probably had on my family, and how, my parents probably were scared, and, the real big context for it. It's easy for either, non-religious or racial or religious violence to be something that gets glossed over and generalized with kids as, that's just bad people, you don't have to worry about it. But what I'm wondering is the lengths to which you went to feel comfortable in breaking it down for kids, the bad stuff, communicating about trauma on a level that they understood, which for me to do that would be, I write goofy stuff, most of the time anyway. That would be especially hard for me. But to sit with something that would have been for child me really difficult to sort of enjoy or pay attention to and consume would be hard for me to write. So I guess that's what I'm curious about for you.
Yeah, it was. And actually the first story that I mentioned that got the offer that I didn't take, that one was the first time I had done something like that. And that dealt with like the Holocaust, sort of, which I didn't understand at the time, growing up in that community of people who had experienced it, and I had no idea. So yeah, it did take a lot of like, going back and trying to remember like that, how it happened, and mainly like to explain it to my kids. So that was my motivation of, what can I do with what I know? And I did spend a lot of time studying about Jewish studies and Israel and history and all that after graduating from high school, because it was really interesting to me. And so I felt like I have a lot of knowledge and I should share it. And that's where Sharing Shalom. I did talk with some kids at synagogues and Hebrew schools. I did do some readings, and right now it's a real thing for these kids. Like this whole idea of Lila, like tucking in her necklace. I mean, Jewish people look like anyone else, really. And so like that's sort of a blessing and a curse, because it's like the blessing that, we're not like always discriminated against by our looks, but it's a curse because we do have a different cultural identity and religious identity that maybe some people don't realize, or they see what they see. And Jewish people can look like anyone really, and because it is a religion you could convert into, and it's also a religion, it's also an ethnicity, so it's a very unique identity. And so a lot of the kids here in Colorado at the Hebrew schools, a lot of the kids are from mixed families. And so you wouldn't guess just by looking at them that they're Jewish or anything. But even these kids are saying they're hiding their identities. And, it's been tough for them to be in a place without a lot of big Jewish community. Sometimes they're the only ones in their class. And one junior high student told me she wants to be proud of her identity, but she also wants to be safe. And so she's hiding it because of that. And so I'm hoping that my book can also talk with these kids. And I feel like the best thing is going and reading it to them, because even a junior high kid probably won't pick up this book because it's a picture book. But I feel like it was even more meaningful for them to hear than the little kids, because if the little kids haven't experienced anything yet, then it's intangible. But these junior high and high school kids are experiencing things. And even though it's told from a kid's perspective, I feel like it's a universal feeling and a universal call for pride. I mean, there's no reason. I mean, the safety is one reason, but I just hope that Jewish kids will, find a way to feel proud about being Jewish and not guilty or embarrassed or hiding it because of a complicated situation far away and people's reactions and all the things going on.
Or just by virtue of their, like you're saying, not being very many people like them. And to your point about that slightly older audience, that's my oldest. She's in 5th grade right now. And that's the point at which, kids, individuals, cat appearance on the podcast.
Sorry, she had to shift. She was sitting on my leg. I was falling asleep. I'm sorry. I did not mean to interrupt you.
Everybody who's listening won't see the cat, but the cat made a sudden appearance, and Brenna's frame is very adorable.
It's Blue. Okay, I am sorry.
Blue is glue.
I really didn't mean to.
I made a conscious choice to let myself be distracted by the appearance of the cat. It's a bit of levity, but hey, quick interruption. Now that we are freshly distracted by cats, let's do a couple of book reviews. Brenda's review for this week is for Bored Panda by Mike Bender and Chuck Dillon. Panda loves his panda pad, but when the power goes out, he's bored. Begrudgingly, he takes a walk in the woods, and though he's not convinced at first, the amazingness of the forest creatures and their creations eventually wins him over. Panda still likes his screen time, but he's found something just as enticing right outside his door. Hey, I don't know this one, but it sounds like I really should get this. If only screen time, desires, and boredom were so easily solved by nature. And for my review, some notes on Becky Scharnhorst and Jiarui Jiang's picture book, Best Buds. It's got plant gags galore and really leans into celebrating, owning your weirdness, and living your best life. Spencer's world revolves around his plant friends, and the humans in his life just kind of make space for him to live his truth. Best part about it is finding someone else with whom he can be weird, not to co-opt who he is or his personality and weirdness, and how weird he feels, but to find someone with whom he's able to just be weird in parallel. That's, I think, probably most of our goal, right? To find weird people who we can be weird with together. And Best Buds really celebrates that. If you would like to find out more about how you can support the podcast, please hit up our Linktree at linktree.com/verseshow, or go to our website, verse.show. And I think that's all I have to say. I hope you have a wonderful rest of this conversation with Danielle. I guess the point that I'm trying to make is, gosh, the older you get, more important it becomes to fit in and be accepted and be part of a social group. And that's the risk that kids take, is like, if they lean into their individual identity, that can other them. And I suppose there's nothing for it except to continue doing what you're doing, which is working toward acceptance from, with a younger crowd. to the extent that, you and Chloe and everybody else who is rightfully promoting own voices, identity, work helps to normalize that.
Yeah, and just as a note, growing up in a Jewish community in the suburb of Chicago was one experience, and I didn't necessarily feel like super proud about it. It was just, who I was. And it was, there were a lot of people like me, but it was actually like going to Israel that really made me like understand and feel a little like more of that Jewish pride, because the people in Israel have grown up, many of them, being survivors or refugees or immigrants. Many of the Jewish people have a very big sense of Jewish pride and identity, more than what we have in America, because we're not, there they have the mission that they are the only country for Jewish people. And going there and seeing everything written in Hebrew and like hearing people speak, like it's just, I think growing up as an American Jewish person without many connections to Israel, I didn't understand that there's like that we have a country. Yes, I've heard of Israel. Yes, we did walk for Israel. Yes, we support it. But I didn't understand that the reason that they exist is because of all the calamities of history and, being a refuge for Jewish people who need it. And that just, got me really, it was just a surprise. That was in high school. There has been, a college program called Birthright, which brings Jewish people who've never been to Israel. And I'm sure many people have that same experience. And that's really, I know it might sound controversial for some people, but it's really like it opened up like a whole new world of like, what does it mean to be Jewish? And like history has, wars and persecution. Like that's how my family came to America, but they could have easily gone to Argentina. Another relative had gone there, and they could have easily have gone to Israel. And it's a very unique history, and I feel like there's just so many layers that it's fascinating, and it's really important to know that this is not like a recent, like a 100 year old situation. This is like a 2,000-year-old situation, and the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. You just keep going back and learning. And I know it's like it's a hard topic, but I feel like it's a really important topic for everybody to really like study and to try and figure it out, and even to visit and to see with their own eyes what's there. It's going into a whole nother issue, but for me that was an important part of discovering my own Jewish identity.
There's a and I'm sorry, Brenda, you look like you had a follow-up question, but
that's okay. Go
ahead. There's the second part of writing trauma that I'm curious about related to this. I mean, exactly your point was a great segue. This is a 2,000-year-old issue, longer than that. These cultural things that we're trying to navigate and educate people on, or you are. But I'm curious. I'm curious the extent to which that you and Holiday House felt a degree of responsibility or sensitivity to make sure and get this right, and did Holiday House go to any extra lengths to just be sensitive to what is a very topical, very urgent, very newsy thing to talk about?
Well, I think that the editors, the two that were interested originally, they knew that this topic has not been covered. I think that they knew this is important for kids, that this Jewish representation has not been with this topic with kids, like maybe junior high, middle school, high school. Yes. I think that Holiday House, my editor, she really wanted another Jewish woman to be an illustrator. And so it was like, luckily, Selena Elko, shout out to her. She's, done so much wonderful like work on multiculturalism and unity and tolerance and understanding. And so, Sally just had this vision that, she's very, very happy when Selena agreed. And Selena had that sensitivity, I think, and I think Sally knew that she would approach this topic with her creativity and her optimism and knowledge of different communities. So I think that having Selena Elko as the illustrator was one way to make sure that the topic would have been represented correctly and or in a sensitive way. And yeah, I think besides that, I'm not really sure. I think they trusted that I'm writing from my experience. And yeah, this was before October 7th, so there was a lot less tension or confusion or animosity or, and so it was a different reality.
So I wanted to circle back just a little bit. We kind of touched on it, but my thought with writing for trauma for children essentially and trying to educate in such an important way is that's hard. That's really hard, and I feel like emotional and can be heavy. And just so my question is, like, what was your process like? Like, how do you sort of get through that? And do you take breaks? Do you write silly stuff on the side to sort of break it up, or is it easier for you to sort of like sit down, get through a draft and then maybe put it aside and come back to it, or are you just happy to be sort of immersed in it, and that's how you do it?
At the time, it was actually, I didn't, think too deeply about it. I think I was sort of thinking about how I could relate the experience that happened when I was a kid to kids today, and how I could instill hope. So it was less about trauma and more about like my vision of what I want to see. That's another thing about the story. It's not super heavy in terms of, I mean, there's one or two low points, but I feel like the main message is a message of hope, of unity, of tolerance. And so I think leading with that was my inspiration. And so, the hardest part, I think, was the page where, Lila asks her mom, why did they do this to the synagogue? And it was really hard to answer that. So that was the main difficulty. And it did go through a lot of different edits and drafts of like, how do you answer that? Like, why do people do hate crimes? Why do people do crimes? Why are people racist? Like, how do you explain that to a kid? How do you explain that to an adult? And so with some workshopping, it ended up, I think there's no real answer to it, but I guess, the answer is like people think we're different and they don't like that. And the original title of the story was called Not So Different. So the whole idea was like, okay, I'm like, we're different, but everyone else is different. So like,
Right.
Jewish people were not so different. And, but Sharing Shalom ended up being like just a perfect title for this story. And I think more positive and more uplifting. But yeah, the heart of the story, I think, is just, whoever feels different because they're not mainstream or whatever. But what is mainstream? Like, how many people nowadays in our society, in our classes, unless you're in a very specific location where there's not a lot of diversity, you look around, and if it's not, the color of your skin, or, if you have glasses, or the color of your hair, it could be like neurodivergence, or, everybody has something. I want to try and normalize, the fact like Jewish people are not so different, right? Coming here in Colorado is the first time really I'm living somewhere without a lot of Jewish people, and I'm meeting people who haven't met Jewish people, and I'm like, wow, this is interesting because, yeah, I mean, these people don't know a lot about like what this is, and so in a way, I'm hoping to like others understand, even if it's just a little bit of like, oh, we go to Hebrew school, we learn Hebrew, like Hebrew, and there's a little Hebrew lesson in the book, and so I'm not sure if that answers everything, but
Yeah. I was just curious because I think, yeah, I love your answer that you're coming at it, from a place of hope. And sharing a culture and not necessarily that it's coming from, like a sort of heavier, darker place, and I know, you wrote it before October 7th, but, even so, I feel like that's sort of the light that the story and the culture needs at this point, as opposed to, sort of highlighting that harder, traumatic part, especially for kids, because like we've mentioned in the conversation already, like it's too big a topic, I think, for kids to absorb at this point, picture book reading kids that age, so you kind of have to talk about stuff in broad strokes anyways, and you might as well highlight the good. And there's a snippet of the piece that you're bringing out in the story, but it's not the whole story anyway.
Right.
Yeah, it definitely answered the question.
Yeah, and I think that was really like just the most important message is, like let's all let's unite against things that are bad, but in a way that's supportive, in a way that's loving, in a way that's, showing our friends that we are with them, despite like a lot of controversies or issues, like something is wrong, like we should show empathy, and we should as Americans and like being part of a community, we should try to unite and understand each other.
Boy, I'm going to do my best to treat this with the respect that I want to. But the question I want to ask here is, did you and Holiday House have any other conversations post October 7th? Has that? No. It was a quick head shake. No, so that didn't change anything about the course of the publication of the book whatsoever. There's something about what you said that I think is really interesting, which is unite against things that are bad. And there are obviously really super complicated aspects of the war in Gaza and the feelings around right and wrong. But I guess the thing that sticks out to me is exactly what you're saying. The unite against things that are bad. People hurting is bad. Hate is bad. There are universalities that we can pull from all of this that hopefully we can all agree on.
Yep.
How did the launch of the book go, Danielle? How was that for you?
So it wasn't as involved or as I thought it would be. I did some events. It was just a very busy time, and so I was excited, and Boulder is a very sort of a small place. So I've reached out to synagogues and schools, and I've read at my kids' schools and done, interviews and things like that. But I did have this in mind that it would be a little bit bigger than it was. And I guess it is all just up to the author.
Yeah.
And I think that also because of the October 7th and the aftermath is a little tricky, and so I'm not sure if that's another reason why it hasn't been as big as I had thought it would be, or if this is just the natural way of it's up to me sort of to
I think it is sort of the natural way of things. Like I've heard from other authors too, like you sort of there, especially as a debut, right? Like you've worked really hard to get to this place, and then it finally happens, and it just feels like it should be this sort of like world stopping event.
Yeah.
But it really is just, it's world stopping for us. But the rest of the world is like, oh, cool, like another book, like that's whatever. Exactly. And you're just like, but wait, but guys, like listen to what it took me to get here. But yeah, I mean, I think that's like, a sort of normal thing for a launch. It sort of is like as big as you can make it, or as much energy as you have to put into it. And I have heard people say there's sort of like a debut like blues on the other side, because all the anticipation going up, and then it's whatever you make of it, and like you can't necessarily depend on other people to be as stoked about your book as you are, and so it whatever happens, and then on the other end, I have heard people be like, well, now what? Like
exactly.
It's like this 3 or 4 year fuse that burns and burns and burns, and then what looks like a bomb just like just opens and there's a book there.
Yeah. anyways, I mean, all that to sort of sympathize and be like, no, that's like totally normal because I feel like my book launch was similar, which I was kind of relieved about. It was like, it
Mhm.
was kind of small and it was for my son's class and I just did like a little reading and it was, it was fine and I celebrated in my own way and that was great because I had the sort of opposite feeling where I was like, God, I have to do so much and it feels really overwhelming and I have to plan all this stuff and where will I get the books and like how do I manage this and I have to talk to this person. And then really it was like, well, you don't have to do any of that. You could just like read it, show up with cupcakes and kids will love you and it'll be a great day. So like, so
Yeah, and it's a little bit tricky, and I am glad that my next book is like lighthearted and has humor because, talking about, all this heavy topics is also not super easy for me. And even
yeah.
though like I know it's important and it's one of the reasons why I wrote it, I'm like I do want to be an advocate and I do want to like keep this topic in people's minds, and but I don't like I do feel like I went to the kindergarten class and I'm reading and like there's like a really sad part, and I don't really like want to make kids feel sad, but I also
Yeah.
want
Yeah.
this message to come across, and maybe in a year or two if they hear about something then they'll remember what they read. And so yeah, I am glad like I do have a funny story coming out, so that it will be probably a little different, and maybe I'll be more motivated to reach out to more kids and hopefully not infuse those.
The only people you'll make sad are people with eggplant allergies, I guess. It's a far smaller audience.
Well,
Yeah,
why
and
don't you? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, I was just gonna say like there is a backstory to that as well, but
Yeah, no, I was gonna say that that's sort of a perfect segue.
yeah.
We're getting close to the hour. We've got like a few minutes left. Why don't you tell
Mhm.
us about your next book coming up and the inspiration for that and what you're looking forward
Yeah.
to.
So Ellie the Eggspert, at first I think it was called Egg Egbert, the Eggspert, and it was
Amazing.
going to be like a little eggplant, like I don't know, main character. And yeah, it was really fun. I did like a picture book. So it was Susanna Hill's
Oh
picture
yeah.
book wizards or some sort of fun workshop about writing picture books. And so I took a few seeds of inspiration, not to have the pun of the seeds and the planting, but
We'll allow it.
like I remembered that the time that I first was introduced to an eggplant, probably around that same time, like third grade or something. And I
Third
was
grade
like,
was a big year for you.
or I'm just like, yeah, I think I was like, okay, probably that age. And I just was like, maybe other kids don't know about eggplants. And like, now it seems a little more popular. I see them in the grocery stores a lot. And I guess I just wasn't as worldly then, but I'm like, well, like, yeah, like let's introduce an eggplant to kids and have a funny story about that. And so I started from there. And also in Israel, there are a lot of eggplant dishes. It's a really popular vegetable. And I did spend 4 years in Israel. So a lot of my experience, like, learning about Israeli and Jewish culture, like, I wanted to spread that as well. And so kids like contests. That's always fun. I remembered winning contests, and that was like highlights and very exciting. And I also really liked Amelia Bedelia, like her literal, yeah,
Yes.
she's so literal and it's just silly and ridiculous. And so um, I sort of made a character like Amelia Bedelia that was introduced to an eggplant in a funny way, and there was a contest at school going on. So I'll leave it at that. And all of that together created this story that wasn't particularly a Jewish story, but when I did have a consult with an editor, they did suggest add in, if that was your inspiration, add in those elements. And this is the great kind of Jewish story, that it's not about being Jewish. It's not about the trauma. It's a regular story about Jewish kids.
Yeah.
That's part of the Own Voices struggle of like, let's just have a regular story, but these characters happen to be from this culture. But it's not going to just be about the culture. It's not going to just be about, these experiences. It's just representation. And That is what really helps normalize, I think, the different groups and help create understanding and just, yeah. So there's a little element of culture, but it's pretty much just like a fun story. And this one is published by Apples and Honey, which is a Jewish publisher.
Yeah. And when does it come out? Do you have a release date so you can tell
March
tell our
3rd.
listeners?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
It's available, and this was the story that got me my first representation, offer of representation from an agent. And I think gardening, planting, food, it's always like a fun topic.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's nothing here to these weird questions about people's backgrounds, but I always like exploring. I mean, you have been an ESL teacher. I wonder the extent to which that has informed your comfort with or proficiency with communicating to kids.
Yeah, I think that I've always really loved like language and exploring silliness sometimes of the English language, learning Spanish, and then I learned Hebrew, then I learned Arabic, and I lived somewhere where they spoke French.
Oh.
And so I've had this love of learning languages, and being an ESL teacher was actually like, it came out from living in different countries and doing like private lessons and having that connection with people who are excited and interested in learning English. And so I feel like, yeah, I mean, having connections and inspiring people to further their learning is one of the reasons why I went into it. And I think also being a picture book author, like you think about those kind of things. You think about what a kid's like and what is interesting for them. And like the biggest thing is being a parent, right? And experiencing that again with your own kids, like discovering language. And that's it.
Yeah, totally.
How proficient are you in all those languages?
The Spanish and Hebrew are pretty proficient. I started learning Spanish like 5th grade after school, and then spent some time in Argentina, and then just kept learning throughout high school, college, to South America, and became immersed in it. And then Hebrew also, living in Israel, and it's a little bit more difficult than learning a completely different language, but I had the background. I learned how to read and write, which a lot of Jewish Americans learn at Hebrew school when they're in like 3rd grade. They start learning how to read and write to prepare for their bar bat mitzvah, to learn the prayers. So I did learn how to read and write, but I didn't understand what I was reading and writing. So that happened in high school when I took my first Hebrew class in modern Hebrew, and then spending time in Israel. Also supplemented that in many, many hours of learning and immersion type. And then Arabic, I studied in Israel also. And I didn't have a lot of practice speaking that, which made it a little difficult learning, because for me, like speaking and experiencing it helped. In Arabic, there's a language that you learn to read and write, and it's a different language than you speak. And so that was a challenge. I guess it's sort of like Shakespeare English versus like, modern English. And, but is very similar to Hebrew. They're both Semitic languages and they have a similar alphabet. Arabic is just like 100 times more complicated, I think, because there's more letters and more grammar. And Hebrew wasn't spoken for about 1,500 years or so. It was always learned, and it was always, it just wasn't spoken for many years. So it didn't develop as complicated, I think, as Arabic did.
We run a real risk of going down a language learning rabbit hole because it's a passion of mine. I have 2 multilingual books, not because I'm fluent in it, but just because it fascinates me. And I do think that there's something about learning other languages that attunes you to being a little bit more culturally sensitive, because I mean, there's something to the use of language and cultural norms and the way that people, not from your normal, the way that those people think and act. So it's fascinating.
Yeah. And it was exactly like, you really understand another culture, really like you could, identify more with the people and just know these little tidbits of things that you wouldn't, and a lot of different countries, speak Spanish. It's not, just you understand one culture, you could understand and learn about like many, many different cultures, and same with Arabic, and like the world is so diverse and so like interesting. And I feel like, that's part of my mission, of bringing people together instead of like othering people. Because when you really learn languages and cultures and visit countries, you see that, you know, there aren't as many differences between us as it could look like.
Yeah. That, I mean, I feel like that's a perfect sum of the conversation as a whole. And we are up and over the hour. So I just want to say thank you so much for joining us. This has been really fascinating. And thank you for sharing your
Thank you for having me. Thanks so much.